Well, welcome back to our, it's turned into a weekly little chit-chat at the minute with Chris Robertshaw, our political commentator. Energy and the Isle of Man and our reliance on things is something you want to talk about. And I know there was, follows on from an interview on the radio you heard the other day with Dr. Alex Allison.
Yesterday, Paul, we need to, not just us and the general public, but Tim Moulton and Keys need to get a grip of this whole issue of energy policy. We are in chaos. We are heading for, if you listen to Alex Allison's interview on Manx radio yesterday, I was appalled by it. It was incoherent. It lacked a knowledge and understanding of what future energy policy needs to look like. He was declaring significant costs were going to be introduced and unavoidable. So what we've got in our Treasury Minister is frankly a quite dangerous person, because on the one hand he seems to be hell-bent on making sure we have high taxation, but he's now pursuing and supporting a policy of poor energy security and high cost. Where the hell are we going here, Paul? This is really concerning. And then you link it, what really concerned me yesterday was a combination of that interview on Manx radio with Alex Allison and the fact that Ørsted declared that the major Hornsea project that they had contracted into, they were pulling out of major offshore wind farm.
There's been a lot of talk about them, financial difficulties, or they're having to rethink their plans.
Well, what's happening, Paul, is that the whole world of wind turbine energy is becoming more and more expensive. This whole idea of, the future is intermittent energy and it's cheap is just nonsense. And we're heading for it's almost a question of me too attitude within our government, which is downright dangerous. And we've got to get our heads around this before the next election, because we cannot allow Tim Moulton, the Keys and the departments of government to carry on pursuing this nonsense agenda, which it absolutely is. And of course you can understand from my perspective, as somebody who's been amongst many other people really concerned about the future well-being of the Isle of Man, and we pursued the importance of the Crogger project only to see that damaged and dashed.
So it's going to come to, obviously, let's make it clear, as always, you are very much involved with Crogger.
Absolutely.
I've missed most of this when I've been away, but it seems to have come to an end, doesn't it? Is that how we left it all?
Yes. The end came, I think it was the end of February. The end came because for 6 years Crogger had been trying to get regulations issued to allow it to move forward. Crogger couldn't move forward. It couldn't enter into a practical process until such time as the regulations were there. And the DOI made absolutely sure within that 6-year period between 2018 and very recently that we weren't going to get those regulations. And yet, on the other hand, they were saying, look, you've got to get us to the point of the 3D seismic test, etc., by a certain date because Ørsted require it. Well, the situation now is Ørsted are pulling their horns in all over the place. The concept of wind farms is getting more and more expensive. And frankly, in my view, at this point, I believe the Isle of Man government is heading for a complete fail. They'll neither get really cost-effective gas, which gave us, low-cost energy and energy security, and significant income to the people of the Isle of Man, helping to pay our burdening costs in health, etc. All that's gone. We may now have very well lost for the foreseeable future, lost the opportunity to have the Ørsted project move forward. So an absolute fail. And frankly, Paul, the Isle of Man government needs to apologise to the people of the Isle of Man, because they have shown themselves to be zealot pursuers
Yeah.
of a false reality.
You've got to remind me here, because it's so long ago now, but you were meant to do something, the thing was set out, you were meant to do your tests or whatever, and you didn't do that, did you? Surely you didn't keep to the original terms and conditions. I mean, it seems like, I say, 6 years ago now.
Well, okay,
they asked you to do something and you wanted to bypass that.
No, the actual situation was that a number of years ago, the government decided it wanted to ensure that the Isle of Man explored the possibility of gas in what is now called the Crogga.
Oh, you're going way back then?
Yes, but this is where it comes from.
Right.
And the government approached a number of majors, oil and gas majors, and they all said, oh, no, it's not big enough for us. So that left the then DOI mindset, well, what on earth do we do? It was the DOI encouraged startups on the Isle of Man to enter into the field. And what they wanted to make absolutely sure of was that the 3D seismic test happened first. Why do I think they wanted that? They wanted that because they wanted then to then sell that concept on, because they had a 3D seismic test paid by the private sector. Now, in the very first instance, when Crogga responded to this opportunity, the Crogga was formed. In the initial stages, they were only given a license for the 3D seismic test because I believe that the DOI were pursuing their own personal agenda, as just described now. And of course, very quickly, the then Crogga company realised that, well, no, you can't possibly spend north of £10 million on a 3D seismic test if you haven't, if it proves to be sufficiently successful to then fail or be disallowed to move on to the exploratory and recovery stage, because you would never get the private investors to put that money in. So Crogga then managed to, with some difficulty it has to be said, persuade the DOI that the license had to be both the 3D seismic test and the exploratory well, because the exploratory well work was the key one, because it's at that point you understand whether the gas...
Did you have a timeline? Did you have a license in place though to do what you meant to do? Then you wanted to change the
no, wait a minute.
terms of it.
Bear with me, because
okay.
I'm going through the timeline here. So DOI reluctantly agreed. Yes, you've got the full license now. Sort of move ahead, but you've got to do the 3D seismic. They were obsessed with the 3D seismic.
You signed up to that.
Crogga, yes, it did, but it was a very difficult process, because the correct procedure in this scenario here was that the exploratory well had to occur first. And it had to occur first because it would have meant that the exposure to private sector's investors at a failure point was only 25 million. But if you had to do the 3D seismic test first, it would be probably north of £40 million fail. So when Richard Hubbard came in, a hugely experienced man in this field, I mean, nobody better, and certainly he knew the whole historical evidence in the Crogga field, because he was the chief geologist for BP when BP pulled out of working in the Isle of Man territorial waters. So he was the perfect man, and he very quickly said, no, we've got to adjust this the right way round. We've got to do the exploratory well first, followed by the 3D seismic. Otherwise we won't get financial investors to come in, obviously, because these people who invest are no fools. DOI did not want this. They became utterly preoccupied with this 3D seismic test, and yet at the same time they were failing to get the regulations in place. So there were a number of reasons why Crogga could not go forward with
you'd signed up to do it, then you wanted to change the terms.
The original company, not fully understanding the situation that they were entering into, I believe, it signed up in good faith, but it was no big deal, Paul.
Well, they made it a big deal, didn't they?
No, the deal.
To say you
yes.
got to go ahead with what you signed up for.
Yes, because they didn't want, by this time, they didn't want it to happen, so they were looking for an excuse and bigging up.
How do you know they didn't want it to happen, though? How do you actually know that?
because for many reasons. I mean, I think it's proper to say at this stage that because Crogga was the licensee to the government's licensor, it was their duty to not constantly enter into public discussion about where things were. And yet DOI consistently, for a while, DOI said, initially, they said, we won't say anything in public and neither must you. And when they decided, DOI decided, no, we need to now start promulgating propaganda defending our position, because they increasingly understood the weak position they were in. They broke that agreement and started promulgating ideas in the public which were completely improper.
Yeah, okay. Well, you did have some MHKs that were also detracting from you and were raising issues quite often.
Well, yes, they were just following whatever DOI told them to do.
You think so?
Yes, absolutely.
They don't have a mind of their own. They're just being told what to say by the civil service.
Well, you know, from
surely not.
You know.
Sorry, that's too sarky, wasn't it? But no, seriously.
You know from previous.
Does it really work like that? Do you think so?
DOI became obsessed with the idea that they didn't want Crogga to happen, and the way they didn't want Crogga to happen was to create this false reality about, it was very, very important to do the 3D seismic test first. There's many occasions and many examples where the process is in reverse, and the way they ensured that Crogga could not progress was to make sure the regulations didn't weren't delivered. 6 years, when in fact the last attempt in the Crogga field to enter into exploratory well work back in the 80s, 90s, it took Tynwald, half an hour or something to nod through the UK regulation.
And this is what you talked about many times. It's easy just to follow the UK. This could have been done and dusted, right?
Yes, because all the professional operators who contract in to, as they would have done, into Crogga, to deliver these are highly professional companies that work continually with what are high quality regulations in the UK under the auspices of the NSTA. And Crogga encouraged DOI to engage with the NSTA, and Crogga never successfully did. Meanwhile, Crogga did enter successfully into a relationship with the NSTA successfully and got full accreditation. It's the DOI that the NSTA would not, the Isle of Man government would not take seriously, and I would put it to you, Paul, would not trust, because they were clearly not a competent body. Then DOI have never been a competent body to deal with the whole matter of...
Let's be clear here. You're putting the blame here on the Department for Infrastructure, the civil servants, basically the individuals, is this we're talking about, or as a culture in there that doesn't want it?
It's a culture. I think in previous interviews I've made it clear to you that a number of the departments are out of control.
Yeah.
They are doing what they want. They can manipulate Tynwald, they can control the vote, and when they decide they want to do something, they have the arrogance and determination to do it. And what they've done is utterly unforgivable, both on their part and the part of members of Tynwald who have just let this drift by. They have thrown away, Paul, the opportunity at no cost to the taxpayer at all to find out. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, but it's back to where we started. The net zero thing is in conflict with this idea of taking carbons out of the ground, right? Hydrocarbons, what it's called. But
there are
conflict.
There are very few. It was a vote through Tynwald that said, at the time, this was the zealot enthusiasm of the day, hard realities across the UK and everywhere else are now coming to play, that actually blind zealot pursuit of net zero is highly dangerous. It doesn't mean you tried your best to enter into transitionary processes, because I fully support that, but you do it in a pragmatic way that doesn't result in the general public paying an absolute arm and a leg.
Because we've seen already the MU have put in, 3 million so far? The Freedom of Information released this the other day, that 3 million has been spent so far on the proposal for the onshore wind farm down south of the Isle of Man.
Well, there's an interesting point if you want to talk about the onshore, Erie Stane one, just for a minute. Ørsted are pulling in their horns everywhere, almost everywhere, saying we cannot. What they're actually saying is we cannot finance these major projects anymore because the finance industry, the investors who really support this, are starting to increasingly get cold feet because these huge wind farms are no longer lasting as long as they thought they were going to. They're more expensive to run, and the finance houses that pick up these projects once the likes of Ørsted have completed them are finding that they can't make money out of them. So it's the financiers behind Ørsted who are increasingly saying, well, this is...
Do you think it'll actually happen?
Well,
the onshore down south?
Well, let's do a corollary to what's happening offshore. Okay. If Ørsted, and they've said it in public, they've given a whole series of reasons why they can't go ahead. Some of these are significantly to do with accelerating costs. Some of those accelerating costs will also apply to onshore. And applying them to onshore will mean that what we're doing is committing to the Eristane project without really understanding what the cost is going to be. I will put it to you, we're in great danger here of ending up with another Liverpool landing stage, where once you press the button and you really enter into it, we really don't know what the final cost is going to be. And it's always going to be the taxpayer who's going to pay up. There was something, I mean, if it wasn't so serious, it would be funny. The other day, a week or so ago, was it now? You know, when the grid collapsed in Spain and Portugal. And it also influenced the elements of southern France as well, I believe. The reason is the instability of intermittent supply services.
Solar panel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Too much. Too
and
quickly.
The explanation was that these new grids, these intermittent grids, haven't got the inertia that the old grids have got, and thus these sort of things happen. Now, what was, as I say, it's funny, but it's also awfully serious, and that is the spokesman from MU was asked to comment on this, and did we have the necessary security? And the argument he put forward to defend the fact that the Isle of Man had got the necessary security in its supply grid was the fact that we've got two traditional generators, one in Douglas and one in Peel.
Using gas or whatever.
Gas and diesel. I think the Peel one was anyway. Yeah. I don't know where it stands now. But if you think about it, what they were saying is the only way security of our supply can be guaranteed is if we remain with gas. And yet, Alex Allison yesterday coming out waxing lyrical about intermittent supply and talking about, well, you know, if the wind farms aren't available, then we've got the interconnector. But, I mean, you know, a Treasury Minister shouldn't be issuing such stupid statements, which is what they are. Because if you fall back away from the wind farm supply, you end up accessing power off the grid in the UK at ridiculously high costs. And that's what's happening. That's why one of the reasons that intermittent renewable energy is so expensive is you have to duplicate and have a reserve traditional supply available to switch on. And that sort of in itself doubles the cost.
Do we need another interconnector anyway, which is going to cost a lot of money, I understand?
Well, and so it goes on. And that's what Alex Allison was saying. He seemed to actually enjoy the fact, if you listen to that interview, how expensive the future was going to be. This is the same man who seems to be hell-bent on pursuing increased taxation to the general public, whilst at the same time, let me finish this point. At the same time, the Isle of Man, government as a whole, just keeps getting bigger and more expensive. We are being hugely misled now.
All I was going to say at this point, as I always have to, I look at the camera and say, Mr. Allison, you're most welcome to join us and have your say on this.
I think he needs to be in a room with somebody like me where he's challenged, because I cannot hear a challenge from Keys members. One or two members, forgive me, one or two members have started speaking out. For goodness sake, people, start understanding what you're talking about on the issue of, let's forget about gas supply. Gas supply is going to be a very significant play between now and beyond 2050.
Okay. let's wrap this up in a bit. In the sense of Crogga, is that dead now? Is that absolutely over and done with? Have you had to, put this to one side? Because you had this other area, didn't you? You were going to the Ronsware thing in the UK and all that. Is that all?
Well, the UK project, which had already been, set up, as it were,
under UK regs, of course.
Totally under the UK.
Yeah,
Crogga was all ready to go with the UK one, but the cost effectiveness of the whole operation depended on using the contractors twice, one after the other. Yep. So you had the economies of scale, and
that's gone then.
Yes, so that's lost. The possibility of Crogga moving ahead, from my perspective, as I see it now, is that the current government, and incidentally, Alex Allinson was no friend of Crogga. Don't let him ever say to you in an interview that he was ever supportive. It was sort of the way he intimated in that interview yesterday that, well, if we go down the gas route, well, I mean, he was vociferously against Crogga. So a combination of the Treasury Minister, who is completely incoherent when it comes to Treasury matters, was in cahoots with DOI, who were zealot pursuers of blind pursuit of green agenda, without understanding that the transition has to be done in a pragmatic way, so neither the taxpayer nor the energy consumer on the Isle of Man pays a fortune. God knows only how the future will look back at the behaviour of this administration, of what's going on at the moment.
Is Crogga finished? I mean,
the short answer is yes, I believe it is. There is a faint possibility that if we get a sensible, business-like house after the next election, and that they said, oh, look, we've got to step back from this net zero, we've got to find our transition way forward in a much more pragmatic and cost-effective way, they could review the decision that they would never issue a licence again.
But somebody else could take the licence technically, because you've now handed it back, haven't you? Or you've not. Where exactly is it?
Somebody else could pick it up. Absolutely.
Right.
Yes. I'm talking about the greater good of the.
I know, but I'm still interested with Crogga,
right.
Because you guys must have lost some money, right, on this whole thing. Then.
Of course. But the threat, the big danger point, is whether or not in the UK, somewhere north of Barrow-in-Furness, there's the plant facility locked into the gas field in the bay here, will continue to operate. And one of the one of the reasons there was some assurance that it would carry on was that Crogga were coming in with this new field. Now, with that possibility removed, we may be in a position where that facility, that plant that handles the gas, cleans it up and presents it to the grid, may close earlier. If that happens, there is absolutely no future for recovering that fantastic asset. So we've lost always the chance of the £2.5 billion worth of revenue coming into the exchequer. Remember also, Crogga were also guaranteeing low-cost, guaranteed maximum price for the Isle of Man consumers. And we've thrown all that away.
How
through
could you not sell that to Tynwald? I mean, when you said there was just not that much enthusiasm for you, I mean, it sounds on paper.
Well, too many members are led by the nose by the departments, and they don't think for themselves, and they don't analyse these matters. They are failing in their duty to represent the best interests of the electorate. Absolute fail. We are not in the position at the moment where we have got a trustworthy and competent house.
Right.
They're running away with their enthusiasms and completely failing the people, the future of the Isle of Man. And I can't tell you how angry I am.
I can see it. But let's imagine it's 2035 now, 10 years from now. What do you think we'll be doing, and how will we be turning the lights on in 10 years' time?
Well, if we're to follow Alex Allinson's wonderful leadership, we're going to end up with high taxation, which will massively damage the economy, high energy costs, which will pauperise the general public, and a significant potential implosion of the Isle of Man economy, because in strategic terms, and we go back to our last interview, our last podcast. We have no high-level, good quality strategic thinking about where our economy is going. We are being hugely misled at the moment. And the more people understand it, the more I think they'll become angry.
Sounds like you have to get back into politics.
Listen, it's not, at my age, no, it's not. All I can do is play my part in encouraging others to focus on the issues that will really matter to the future well-being of the island. And
that's it for now, though. You're no more interested in drilling or anything else then? This is it?
There's nothing I can do. You know, we just have to sit back and watch the gross irresponsibility of our administration.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
Which is what it is. Let's make no mistake about that.
We had a great amount of views for the last week's programme. Yeah, people are really interested in this thing. So thank you for watching. If you have a subject you think we should be touching, well, come to us. And
if those who watch this, all I would ask them to realise is how badly they are being let down by the bureaucracy and a number of politicians who are leading us up the garden path and into an expensive and unsustainable world. Yeah, I mean, this whole idea, I couldn't believe Alex Allison in that interview yesterday talking about the importance of energy security. We have energy security now. He wants us to go down a route that ensures we don't have it. Okay. He must start explaining.
Well, hopefully he will.
Well, he needs to, and he also, the Council of Ministers need to explain and articulate what the real costs of all these things are going to be, and what the impact on the public is, on top of the increase in taxes that they're determined to bring in. Sorry, I'm ranting a bit now, but I am very angry.
No, that's great. And again, the doors are open for anyone who has, to balance this up, has a different opinion on this. In the meantime, we'll see you probably next week.
Hopefully.